Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. I am very, very pleased that you are all here with me today. It's one of those special shows. I haven't done one for a couple of months. It's just you and me. So if you're catching us on the live stream, let me know your questions, your comments. What are you going through? Did you do last week's homework? Let me know and I'll answer all your questions during this show. Did you catch last week's show with Jeff and Jennifer? It was a wonderful interview all about leading with light. Hope you had a chance. If you didn't catch it, please go back into the archives. We've actually had a number of really good shows lately, so I hope you've been keeping track. Um, so yeah, it's just you and me today, and of course, I'm still starting off my show as I always do with a blog post that I wrote a couple of years ago. And this one's actually kind of funny since it's just you and me today, because this blog post is the person who constantly talks only desires to be heard. Maybe I'm writing to myself. Jeez. All right. So let's see what this blog post's all about. We all know someone who just loves to talk. They speak so much that you can't do anything but listen. Everyone around them sees how much they ramble. Yet for some reason, the person seems so unaware of how much they talk. It is easy for us to criticize them for talking so much. Just to let you know, I am very aware. I know how much I talk. I talk a lot. Many people will just get impatient with them and stop listening. How often do we take the time to ask why they talk so much? Is it that they have so much more to say than everyone else? Are they just addicted to the sound of their own voice? Or do they have just no clue how inappropriate it is for them to just keep speaking all the time? Perhaps there is something deeper going on. Maybe the person has some deep need that just never gets fulfilled. Or could there be some trauma in their past that keeps them expressing without a pause? Many times, the person who is constantly talking has a strong desire to be heard. For whatever reason, they feel that if they are not constantly expressing themselves, that they will not be seen or heard. This may come from a deep fear or lack, a fear of being alone. For this person, being alone is a very scary thing. It may be that they were left alone as a baby when they needed food or to be changed. Or it could just be that their parents were so caught up in their own challenges, they had no time for them. It may also come down to a deep sense of lack of self-worth, a deep-seated fear that they actually have nothing to contribute to life, so they must keep talking to prove to themselves that they do have something to contribute, regardless of the actual reason. It all comes down to trauma in one respect or another. So knowing all of this, what do we do? How do we deal with the person who just can't shut up? The first thing is to approach the situation with compassion. Almost certainly, the person has no idea that they take up as much space as they do. To attack them or make fun of them will not help the situation. That may only make things worse. When we can start with reflecting back to them what we hear them saying so that they can know that they are heard. Yet without professional help, that may only work a little. Ultimately, we have to decide what is appropriate for us, to have our own boundaries and decide for ourselves how much is too much for us to handle. When we hold those boundaries firmly but compassionately, we then hold those we then hold those boundaries firmly but compassionately. Do not make the other person wrong for being the way they are. That helps no one. Hear them when you are together and decide how much you can listen. Then wish them well and move on with your day. For certain, they will try to find someone else to listen to them. And if the opportunity arises that you might suggest they seek professional counseling, take it. They may hear or they may not. It is not up to you. Perhaps one day they will find that they do feel heard. And then they might just stop talking so much. Do you know someone like that? Can you be compassionately firm with your boundaries with them? So, this post kind of comes from a conversation I had with my wife when she overheard a conversation I was having on the phone with someone who just kept talking and talking, and I would say, uh-huh, yeah, uh-huh, and I just didn't say much. I was just listening. And she was like, my God, they talk so much. We had a conversation because we know I've come across, many people in my life who just love to talk. And the old expression is, yeah, they just love the sound of their own voice. But I just kind of felt like, when somebody's talking all the time, there's something deeper going on. There's something more there. And it really, to me, it just made so much sense that somebody who talks all the time must never feel heard. Because when we feel heard, then we don't need to talk as much. But when we don't feel heard, that's when we're constantly thirsty for someone, anyone to just listen to us. And so if we understand that this extreme behavior, this inappropriate behavior where they're speaking all the time, comes from a pain they're feeling, it can make it a little bit easier to work with them. I've worked with a number of people in ceremony um, where they just couldn't sit and be with themselves, that there was so much anxiety and so much fear and pain that they had to keep talking just to let the energy out, that the prospect of just sitting still and just being with themselves was so scary to them that they had to keep expressing themselves. And even if I guided them back to being a little more internal or being with their breath or just practicing sitting with themselves, it wouldn't last long. And so you can see with people like that, it's coming from their anxiety. It's coming from their need to fill up the space, because the idea of empty space, the idea of just just being in the silence is such a scary prospect to them, because then they have to listen to their own thoughts, because then they have to feel their own feelings. And for many of us, that's like, what's the big deal? But for some people, that actually is a big deal. That actually is terrifying for some people. So how do you deal with someone like that? Because nobody enjoys being with someone who just constantly talks and talks and talks and talks. And really, when we find someone who has such an extreme behavior, the only way I can think of to really handle that situation that serves us, the listener, is to know what our boundaries are, is to know what's okay for us and what's not okay for us, and to just call it out and just be like, look, you know, I've got 5 minutes. That's all you got. And then I got to go. And that's it. Or like you ask them one question, hey, I just want to know about this one thing. Just tell me about this. And they tell you all about it, and then they start going off on tangents. And it's like, thank you, really. I just wanted to know about that one thing. I'm glad, things are okay. I got to go now. And so by keeping that strong boundary with ourselves of what's okay for us and what's not, then we can have that strong boundary with the other person, and we can be okay with interrupting them, telling them we have to go, or finding some reason why you can't continue the conversation. Because basically, we've just reached our limit. And it's okay to have limits, right? We don't have to indulge somebody like this 100% of the time. And sometimes, depending on who the person is, Um, sometimes you can learn a lot from just listening to them ramble and ramble and ramble. You can learn a lot about who they are and what are they obsessing about. So if we have the patience and we have the time and the compassion and we can really just sit there and listen, just sit there and listen. And we don't have to, you know, make it something more than it is. But I just kind of feel, at least for myself, this may not be for everybody, but just for myself, when I can see that someone is talking so much out of their pain and their anxiety and their trauma, that that's what's really causing them to express themselves so much, that then I do my best to let them know that I heard them. And sometimes it means interrupting them and saying something like, oh, so what you're saying is da 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 da. Like, is this really what you mean? You mean da 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 da? And you reflect back to them what you've heard from them. And maybe sometimes you can reflect it back to them in a way that gets them to think about it a little bit. And depending on the person, for some people, that will help them to really feel heard. And they'll really appreciate that. When you can do that, they just might start talking a little bit less when they can really feel that you're being present with them, that you're hearing them, that you're understanding them. That once we really penetrate the surface and get in there, that might be all they need. And so maybe they slow down. Maybe they be a little more present with you. Now, again, this doesn't necessarily work with everyone. There are some people who are narcissistic and self-centered and borderline who, will just do anything to grab all the attention. But for someone who's doing it out of anxiety, I'll give you another little trick. Sometimes I say to them, especially when they talk really fast, I'll say, can you please slow down? Because I really want to hear every word you have to say. And when you speak fast, it's hard for me to hear what you're saying. And you get them to just take a breath and slow down. And then maybe, just maybe there'll be a little bit of space, a little bit room to have a conversation instead of listening to a monologue. Of course, reading this blog post on an episode where I don't have a guest and it's all just me, it's kind of like the pot calling the kettle black. But I do these kinds of episodes because my loyal listeners have told me that they really like it when I riff on a particular topic. So yeah, this is just this blog post. Take it for what it's worth. Maybe it's just me calling out myself. But maybe this helps and helps you to relate to somebody who you know like this. So the title of the blog post again is The Person Who Constantly Talks Only Desires to Be Heard. And of course, you can find that on my personal website, theconsciousconsultant.com, or on the talkradio.nyc website, talkradio.nyc/blog. All right. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about our topic this week, which is what does community really mean? Um, and just had a real experience of community this past weekend, and I'm going to talk all about community. And I'd love to hear your comments and questions and thoughts around community as well. So you're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We do this every Thursday, 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on talkradio.nyc and all over social media on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Twitch. And we'll be right back with the rest of our show in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
If you don't have your health, what do you really have? It's time to feel good in your body and shift from struggle to ease. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Tripp, your host of Nourish the Soul, where we explore the sacred wisdom of your body while you sit back, relax, and go on a journey of self-discovery. Join me every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to awaken your heart, transform your well-being, and unlock a deeper understanding of yourself.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
And welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. So let's start getting into our topic of the day, which is community. And And still, I would love to hear your comments and questions and experiences all around community. Um, and it was quite interesting. The concept of community was not one that I was really super aware of the importance for myself for a long, long time. And it was probably about maybe 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago, when I started doing this ceremonial work that it really started to become front and center for me. And I felt like I really found my community. I felt like the people I was working with at the time, they were like brothers and sisters to me. And I really so appreciated them. And then when I look back over my life, I realized, wow, like there are many places that in my life that I was trying to create community from different organizations I was involved with different friends at different times. I was always the kind of person to try and bring people together, helping to coordinate meetings and things like that and facilitate meetings. And so community started to be more present to my consciousness and more front and center for me. And then this notion about, with doing the ceremonial work of seeing how when people come together to do their deep healing work and they share their stories with each other, they share their trauma with each other, their pain, their grief, their anguish, and they find someone else who also has grief and pain and anguish and can relate to them, and there's such a similarity between them that it really, just that connection, just that sense of community can be tremendously healing for people. And, when we talk about community, we tend to use the term in a lot of different ways. Sometimes when we talk about community, we mean just the neighborhood that we live in and the people who surround us where we live. But is that real community? Are those really the people who will be there for us? Maybe, sometimes. Sometimes people talk about community, it's about their religious affiliation, their church, synagogue, temple. Are those people really community? Maybe. Other times it's about our family, our relatives. Maybe it's about our heritage, our nationality, our race. What is it that makes a community a community? And for me, what I've come to realize and come to appreciate and come to really feel in my body is that community for me is a group of people with a shared experience, that shared experience is so powerful that there's something that they can share with each other that they can't share with people who haven't had that experience. And and sometimes that experience can be a painful one. It can be an uplifting one. It can be a spiritual one, a religious one. It can be an experience of being persecuted. It can be an experience of being, um, uh, uh, pushed against. It can be an experience of being hurt or injured. I think that sometimes that's why when people have some experience and they go to one of these meetings of other people who've had the same experience, like Alcoholics Anonymous, Al-Anon, other kinds of quote unquote anonymous meetings, that people can feel closer to the other people who've been through that same challenge that they've been through than their neighbor, than their brothers or sisters and their family. So that shared experience is what really lays the foundation for true community in the way I'm using the word community. And there are many ways to use the word, and there are many different flavors of community. But when I talk about community, community are the people who get you in a way that other people don't get you. They're people who support you in a way that other people don't support you. They're people who you feel safe with in a way that you don't feel safe with other people. And when you find that community can be so, so precious to us. And when we come together, and you know, and you know that feeling, you found it when you have this experience. And this was an experience I had, 10 years ago. It was a few months after I started doing the ceremonial work. And the person who was facilitating at the time, he used to do these meetings every Monday night. He would rent a space and you could just show up. You didn't have to RSVP, and just whoever came, and we just talk about where we are in our process. And I remember I hadn't been to a ceremony for a while, and I hadn't been to one of these, we call them integration meetings, for a while. And I just had this feeling, oh, I got to get to the meeting tonight. I got to get to the meeting tonight. And so I left work, and I was a little bit late, but I didn't care. And I got down there, and I remember opening the door to the room and walking in, and then seeing everybody's face. And when I saw them, my heart just sang. I felt like my chest just opened up. And I just knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And just that feeling of being with these people that I cared about so much, who I knew cared about me, it was like a homecoming. And it was like, oh, yeah, these are my people. And that's when I knew, this is my community. It's when you see them and you just feel your heart lift just by their mere presence. That's community. That's how you know you found your community. And everyone's community is different. And what brings different people together are different aspects, different things. And you may say to me, Sam, like, that sounds great, but I don't know who my community is. Go and find them. They're out there. There's 8.5 or 8 something billion people out there. I can guarantee you that whatever your life experience is, whatever you're feeling in the moment, there is a group of people out there somewhere who feel the same way, who've had similar experiences, who can relate to you in a way that no one else can. Those people exist. When you have such numbers as we have today, they can't not exist. There's such a plethora of individuals and people. And sometimes we can find them online, and sometimes we got to find them in person. Whatever it is, that's okay. So, okay, it's time for me to take another break. I've been talking a lot. Yes, I know I talk a lot. Um, and when I come back, I just want to talk about the experience of community from this past weekend, and I'll tell you all about it and why, to me, when I saw the way people came together, it gave me that feeling like, this is a real community. So everyone, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We do this live every Thursday, 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on talkradio.nyc, and we'll be right back to talk more about community.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
If you don't have your health, what do you really have? It's time to feel good in your body and shift from struggle to ease. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Tripp, your host of Nourish the Soul, where we explore the sacred wisdom of your body while you sit back, relax, and go on a journey of self-discovery. Join me every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to awaken your heart, transform your well-being, and unlock a deeper understanding of yourself.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
And welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. I'm speaking this hour all about community. And so why did I choose this topic for this week? I mention it here and there, but I decided to dedicate a show to this topic because this past weekend, I was up in New Hampshire working with a group of people doing the healing work that we do. And we've gone up there a number of times. And it was just so beautiful to see the way people came together. And it was interesting because most of the people were actually related to each other in some way, but there were some people who were there who were not related, who were just friends. And as we went through the ceremony together, and people talked about their pain, their overwhelm, their challenges in life, and not just to me, but to each other. And that's the key. I was just watching and observing, not all the time, but much of the time, and seeing how people were there for each other, supporting each other, listening to each other, and just allowing each other's process to unfold the way it unfolded. it just really felt like, this is really what community is all about. And the truth is, that sense of community started long before we went up there and long before the ceremony started. Because one of the participants who's here in New York City near us, she had met a couple of the people of this group in other ceremonies that they had come down to, and she had decided to come up. And and one of the people from the community who had never met her actually picked her up at the bus stop, brought her to the cabin, and she started to get support, arranging all this even before she ever left New York. So people were showing up for each other and connecting to each other outside of the ceremony. And so seeing how people were really there for each other, it had a very special feeling to it. And then there were people who were relatives of each other who admitted to family members that they didn't always show up the best. And there were other people who said how knowing that this other person who they didn't even know that well was going to come to the ceremony, put a smile on their face, and that made them both feel so good. And seeing how everyone was there for each other, even though they were going through their own process, even though they were dealing with their own pain, their own overwhelm, seeing the support that everyone was giving each other, not because they were told to, not because it was expected of them, not because there were rules around it. No, they did it out of the generosity of their heart. They did it because they were coming from a place where they felt so connected to each other, regardless of how well they knew each other or didn't know each other. And that to me, really, that to me really is what community is all about. And it was so precious and so special. And you could feel it in the air. And in some ways, that's what community is all about. It's about this ineffable quality that you can't quite touch, but you can feel. You can see it, but you more have to experience it. And yes, like being in a cabin in the woods on a lake in a beautiful environment, that helps to sort of drop our normal defenses and drop our masks a little bit. But ultimately, it really just comes down to sharing our hearts with each other. And that to me is really what community is all about. It's sharing ourselves, our dreams, our fears, our nightmares with each other from our hearts, not from our heads. Community doesn't happen in the mind. Community happens in the heart. And when we connect to people, when we can feel that shared experience with someone else, and then we can carry it through out of that shared experience. Part of the reason why this group has such a feeling of community is because of the way they connect outside of the ceremony. How do they connect when they're not all together? And the fact that there's still interconnections and they're talking to each other and they have groups going on and they go to do things together. And look, did that happen before they came together in ceremony? Yeah, absolutely. But did it start to happen more once they came together in ceremony? Totally. And it's not just even the frequency. It's in the how they come together. It's in the vulnerability. It's in the authenticity with which they come together, even outside of the ceremonial space, that really builds that sense of community. Now, look, this kind of feeling, this kind of sense, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, there was already sort of a foundation in place before we came up to New Hampshire, but we've been going up there, I think, for like 2 years now. Probably going up there 2 to 3 times a year, maybe more, maybe less. But each time it builds, each time people come together, there's that feeling a little bit more and more and more. So I don't want it to sound like, oh, people just come together once and there's instant community. No, it's not like a freeze-dried ramen noodles that you just pour in hot water and boom, you've got instant community. That's not the way this works. And not every group of people that come together in ceremony and have an experience together form a community. It takes a little bit more than just that. That may be a foundational piece, but it takes some consistency. It takes some regularity of coming together. And it takes coming together in that way where we really drop our masks, where we really allow ourselves to be vulnerable and authentic and share what's really going on in our life that we don't usually share with people, that we don't usually want people to know, that we don't usually feel comfortable talking about in polite company. It's when we get over ourselves. It's when we show up and we say, look, I'm struggling because of this and that. I'm struggling with finances. I'm struggling with health. I'm struggling with connection. I'm struggling in my relationships. I haven't really been showing up in the best way. It's when we can really be honest about that, honest about our faults, honest about where we don't feel good about ourselves. When we can show up that way and share that with others, they feel then safe to share with us their own feelings of inadequacy, of lack of self-worth, of lack of confidence, of whatever it is. When we show up that way consistently with each other and metaphorically holding each other's hands as we walk through the fire, that's what builds community. That's what creates the bonds that hold us long after we've been together. And true ceremony is timeless. True community is beyond the physical. There's an energetic quality about it that just when you get together with this group of people, there's that sense of belonging. There's this sense of like, this is my tribe. These are my people. Like these are people I would walk over broken glass for. Like these are people who, if they were in trouble, like we would be the first one there, even if it's 1 o'clock in the morning to help. That's community. That's connection. That's coming from our hearts. All right. So that's my little story from this past weekend. Um, I got one more break and I got a few more things to say about community. And I noticed the comments on the video live streams aren't, very active right now, but I'd love to hear your questions, your comments, your experiences about community. Put it into the comments section. I'll respond and I'll comment on what you put in, and I'll come back and wrap it all up. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, and we'll be right back after this.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Broncu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
And welcome back. So we've been talking all about community this hour and the importance of it and what real community is. So why is community so important? Well, why is this coming together and being connected with these with people who we feel we're connected to in a different way? Why is it so important? Thing is, I think we can all agree there's a good amount of challenges in the world today. Life is more complicated. Life is more challenging than ever before. And things are getting more extreme. The weather is getting more extreme. I mean, look what just happened in the Southeast and in North Carolina with the hurricane sweeping through. And literally physical communities being wiped out. And people being stuck because all the roads are flooded. There's no electricity, no cell service. That's when real community steps up and comes forward and helps each other. And I have friends down in Asheville, and, I heard about how, people were really checking in on the older people. People were trying to help people who had small children and help people who didn't have a lot of food. And people really came together for each other in the midst of all this devastation. And I don't want to predict bad events, but if you just look around, things like this are happening more and more and more every year. They say this was a once in a lifetime hurricane. There's going to be more once in a lifetime weather events. Things are getting tenser around the world. There are more regional conflicts than we've seen for a while. More wars happening. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but that could spread. They could become bigger conflicts. I am cautiously hopeful that even though things are looking bleak, that things will get better eventually. But it sure feels like things are going to get worse before they get better. And so, in this time of great change and increasing chaos, community, local community, community of people who you trust with your life becomes increasingly important. So that when we have some challenge that we're facing, that we know we have others to rely upon and we're not all alone. Now, the interesting thing is, some of the people who say they feel isolated and lonely and they don't have community are some of the people who isolate themselves and don't look for community and don't put themselves out there and don't try and connect to people to find their community. I sincerely hope you're not one of those people. And I trust that if you're listening to this show, if you're listening to this podcast, if you're listening to this live stream, that you're not one of those people, that you recognize that the importance of connecting with like-minded, like-hearted, like-spirited people who can really get you. And sometimes you find them in the most unlikely of places. And sometimes they're not right there next to you. Sometimes they're around the world, because in today's world that's so virtual and so interconnected via technology, lots of times we find our community and they're not in our hometown. But depending on the size of the town you live in, if it's a city, it's large enough, you can find at least some of them locally. And so for me, the antidote for all the division and polarity we see in society today is to come together, is to find community, is to find those people we can truly feel safe with and trust. And just maybe, if enough of us model what it's like to behave like we're in a community, that type of behavior will catch on and will spread. And that sense of community will grow beyond our immediate community. And we can find ourselves in a larger community. We can find ourselves in a worldwide community. And for me, this is my call to action for all of you. This is my sincere hope and intention and wish for all of my listeners that you will find your community, that you will find that special group of people who you feel held by and who you hold. And maybe they're next door, and maybe they're across the ocean. Maybe they speak the same language as you, and maybe they don't. But what is it for you? What is it that you love so much that when you meet someone else who also loves that same thing, that it brings you a sense of connection, a sense of, yeah, like this is my person, these are my people. Can you even identify what that is for you? For me, it's all about raising consciousness. It's all about supporting people in having a more conscious, a more aware, a more awake life. And that's why I do this. And that's why I have this show. And that's why I do everything that I do, is to touch people's lives in a way that empowers them to be more conscious, more aware, more awake, more inspired, more motivated to be who they really are. And oh, what a community we would have in this world if everybody would just be more of who and what they are. So that's my show for this week. What does community really mean? I'd love to hear from you what community means to you and what have your experiences been with community, good, bad, and otherwise. And I hope you'll join me next week for the Conscious Consultant Hour. And of course, if you missed any part of today's show, you can always catch the replay on talkradio.nyc and all over all the podcasting platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio. Ooh, loyal listener, Sanaya. Thank you. Beautiful advice, and we thank you. I will catch the beginning of the show in the recap. Thank you, Sanaya. Yes, so please catch the replay. Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you all next week.